We have moved away from just emergency response to now attempting to mainstream climate change in our national planning. One of the things that was done when this new government took office was that the Prime Minister named a ministry with climate change in its portfolio. So we have a ministry with responsibility for water, land, environment, and climate change. And those different portfolio responsibilities really have a lot in common. Also established was a climate change advisory committee, which incorporates a number of skills sets and knowledge sets which would not normally exist. So we have that added benefit of this committee made up of stakeholders from academia, NGO, donor partners, that can bring a lot of information, the latest science, to bear, to help to advise and inform what we do in the ministry. But we have also set about, with the support of the GCCA through the EU and of course government of Jamaica, to prepare a climate change policy framework and action plan. And working along with other development partners, we intend in the next stage to move to developing detailed sector action plans. So the policy framework identifies some objectives, set of principles, coordinating mechanism, accountability mechanisms, and it also identifies some flagship programs that we will be implementing in the short term, and mandates the various sectors to now prepare detailed sector action plans. We moved away from trying to just have one large comprehensive national climate change policy, because we felt that by having detailed sector action plans, then the sectors would have greater ownership of what would need to be done by their sector. And so with that greater ownership and greater buy-in, we believe that implementation would be easier, and coordination of the implementation process would also be easier. Another thing that the policy framework calls for is for each of these key sectors to name focal points. So we'll have climate change focal points in each of the key ministries and key sectors that will have a role in implementing the policy. A number of different development partners have shown a great willingness to support what the government is doing. And so we have had to manage these relationships with development partners, because we run the risk sometimes of programs and activities overlapping, or worse, working at cross purposes. And we definitely would not like that to happen. We believe there is enough scope to accommodate all who would want to support us, even if they're doing similar programs and similar activities. We can so manage and schedule in time and space to ensure that even if there is overlap, then what is happening is that the activities are mutually supporting and mutually reinforcing of each other. And one recent initiative taken by our minister is to call the development partners together in a round table, in a dialogue, for better sharing of information, laying out the priorities of the government, and that way we can better understand what each one is doing, and they can understand to what the other partners are doing. We also had a little challenge, because when we started working on the climate change policy, that was a program funded by the EU, UNEP, and we had a certain output for that, which was the climate change policy and action plan. But as we went down the road and another partner came on board with advice and so on, we had some different thoughts about how we wanted to fashion this policy, and the government decided Well, what we really wanted is a policy framework and not one large comprehensive policy, which would really be more difficult to implement. And so it took some amount of negotiating and maneuvering, since we started out with one particular output in mind, but then found that we wanted to modify a little bit. So sometimes if you're not exactly clear in your mind as to what you want to do, you could end up with an output that may not suit your best purpose. And so you have to build in some degree of flexibility in the programs and initiatives that you start out with. It is a complex arrangement, and you have to be able to talk to all partners. You have to be very transparent and share information. There has to be a level of trust as well. Your development partners need to trust you, and you need to have confidence as well in your partners. It calls for a certain frequency of interaction as well, and you have to be very accommodating to your partners. Information has to flow on a timely basis so they are aware of what you're doing, and if there is a change or a contemplated change in direction, that is something that you have to communicate early. But there is and must be constant dialogue going on as a project or a program gets implemented. We have found that a number of them are very much aware of the impact of climate change. The fishers, for example, who make their living from the sea, they have seen declining yields from the sea. They know something is happening. They might not fully understand all the science behind it. People living in coastal areas have seen sea level rise. Some people have lost property, so they are aware that something is happening. Some of the crops we have in Jamaica, some of the fruits, are coming in at odd times of the year. You know, so you might have a mango crop coming in at an unusual time. People are aware that something is changing, even though they may not understand the science. And so having a knowledge of climate change is important, but we need to move beyond just having a knowledge of climate change, being familiar with the phrase, but knowing how individually and as a community they can respond to help to build resilience and also to reduce the risk that the potential disasters might bring. So it's very important that we have buy-in from the man in the street. We are at the level where there is a fair amount of knowledge. We need now to translate that knowledge into informed behavior and actions.